Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. The weather people tell us it's going to be the most frigid Thanksgiving ever. People in New York, people in Boston, people in Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, it's going to be really, really cold. And that, what do they call it, the Clippers coming in from the polar regions is going to be cold. But down here, it's balmy. Everybody needs to come to Virginia Beach, the garden center of the world. By the way, my producer was on the phone and said, "Did you see the game?" And the answer was, unfortunately, I didn't, because I watch college football and I didn't see the pro game. They set a record in scoring. Unbelievable. Did you see it?
I didn't see it either. I heard about it, though. I don't even know how you do that.
I don't either. Over 100 points. Unbelievable. I mean, these guys are supposed to have good defense, but they didn't have very much. Okay. Well, there's a Republican senator in Iowa who said her great talking point when she runs, she's the only candidate who can castrate a bull. Well, that's nice, because that's what she said she could do. And she's now the first Republican woman in the leadership in the Senate next year. Iowa's Joni Ernst is going to tell CBN about, well, it's about time the women have a role.
I wonder if that could start a trend. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Don't castrate any more bulls, please. Enough. Right.
Well, Senator Ernst also says if the GOP wants to win in 2020, it needs a new message for women. Abigail Robertson sat down with the senator to get her views on leadership and winning back the women's vote.
Next year, Senator Joni Ernst becomes the first female on the Republican Senate leadership team in nearly a decade, and she says it's about time.
We need to be reflective of our constituencies, and having all males on the leadership team is not reflective of our society.
Are you worried at all that Republicans are losing the support of suburban women?
Well, that was one of my great pushes when I ran for leadership as well, is that we do have to communicate clearly to our constituents and suburban moms and women everywhere, whether they are in suburbia, whether they are in the rural areas. They want to know that we have a strong economy. They want to know that that we are placing our education priorities in the states and with the local school boards and administrators and parents.
Ernst tells CBN News while she's not happy the GOP has lost control of the House, she's encouraged by the record numbers of Republican women winning statewide races.
We've had a lot of really wonderful accomplishments as conservative women. So in that aspect, we saw great successes in the election cycle, but we need to understand there's some areas we can do better in.
How would you describe Senate Republicans' relationship with President Trump in the White House?
Well, I get along quite well with the president, and while I don't always agree with the president, I always respect our president. He has a very difficult job, and so I think that's the challenge that many Republicans see, is that sometimes he may differ a little bit on the issues. Okay, that's all right. How do we come together and work on those priorities for the president?
One of those priorities will be confirming presidential nominees, including a new attorney general.
I admire Jeff Sessions very much. I admire him, and I think he did a great job for our president. But it is up now to the president to make that decision on who should be a permanent replacement for Jeff Sessions. And we will, as the Senate, provide advice and consent, and we'll do the best we can.
Ernst says things will be very different with Democrats controlling the House. She hopes both parties can work together on infrastructure and address issues with the Affordable Care Act during the next 2 years. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, a tremendous senator. Congratulations, Senator Ernst. You're going to do a good job. And I forget, was she a party whip or something? I mean, just doing great. Well, in other news, one of the strongest women leaders in the Democratic Party is facing an uphill battle to reclaim her position as Speaker of the House. John Jessup has more on that.
That's right, Pat. A mounting challenge to Nancy Pelosi. 16 Democrats released a letter Monday opposing her bid for Speaker. The 78-year-old Pelosi is seeking to regain the post she held from 2007 to 2011 as the first female House Speaker. Her opponents say it's time for a newer, younger voice to lead their caucus. On CBN's Faith Nation program, Chief Political Analyst David Brody said the numbers may be against Pelosi now, but no one should count her out.
If you do the math, she can only lose 14 Democrats at this point. 16 are on the letter. If that stands, she wouldn't be Speaker. Having said that, no one expects necessarily these 16 Democrats, just because they're on the letter saying they won't vote for Pelosi now, doesn't mean come January that she won't be Speaker of the House. Things have a way of working themselves out here in Washington.
So far, no other Democrat has announced a run for Speaker. Well, a federal judge blocked President Trump's executive order barring asylum hearings to immigrants who enter the country illegally. The order requires asylum seekers to make their claim at one of the 26 official points of entry on the southern border or face immediate deportation. A San Francisco-based U.S. district judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking enforcement of the policy. And Pat, no doubt the administration will likely file an appeal here.
Well, I'm sure they will. But, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I said it before, there's got to be a change in this. I mean, how many? We've got 50 different states. We've got all these federal judges in these districts, and they're appointed by the president. And suddenly these guys are making rulings to stop the person who was elected by all 50 states, at least by the majority of the Electoral College, to be the president. He's president of the United States, and he's supposed to be the one in charge of all this. They're sure there's a federal law, but there are also laws that give the president the emergency power in the event of some problem that he can suspend some of these things. It's in the law. And so the president says, I'm suspending some of this because I think there's a danger to our country. And this one little federal judge out there in one little district is making these rulings. We've got to stop this. And you read the Constitution, it's so clear. There's supposed to be one Supreme Court and then such lesser courts as the Congress from time to time will appoint with their jurisdiction and so forth. The Congress has the power to set their jurisdiction, the limits of their authority and so forth. A federal judge does not have power over the entire United States of America. They just don't. And to have to go through the ordeal of taking these appeals to the the Circuit Court, then up to the Supreme Court, go through all those hoops and the thousands of dollars it costs to do it, when these guys should not be allowed to rule beyond the district in which they serve. And it's time for Congress to fix that. They can do it under the Constitution, very simple, with a simple majority. That's all they need. And they can do that because the Constitution gives Congress that power. They ought to make something about it. Now, down to the south of us, there is an evil empire growing, and the Trump administration is doing something about it. John?
Pat, the Trump administration might add Venezuela to a list of countries that sponsor terrorism, a list that right now includes Iran, North Korea, Sudan, and Syria. Senator Marco Rubio is leading the effort to designate Venezuela a state sponsor of terror, claiming the South American nation has ties to terrorist groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon. The move would heighten U.S. pressure on Venezuela's socialist government led by Nicolas Maduro. Well, in California, victims of the disastrous wildfires are just trying to survive day to day. Even though many churches were lost in the fires, some are still stepping up to help those in need. Mark Martin has a story.
The wildfires burned roughly 2/3 of the churches in Paradise, California to the ground. But even though churches have been hit hard, members are pushing through to help their neighbors in need. The East Avenue Church in Chico now doubles as an emergency shelter, a haven for hundreds who've been displaced by the Camp Fire in Northern California. Blair Maness lived in his Paradise home for nearly 22 years before the wildfire destroyed it. He now calls the East Avenue Church home. A lot of volunteers are on site to support victims like Maness.
People have walked in here and done an amazing job, not because I've done any of the organizing, but because we just gave them permission to come in and do what they do best.
The church not only is providing food and medical help, volunteers are also trying to find those on the missing list.
We are cross-referencing every person that we have in our facility with people on that list. And last night, our medical team was actually seeing people one by one, and they actually were successful in identifying 12 people on the list. CBN's Operation Blessing is also on the ground in Northern California, meeting with church leaders and giving grants to churches that are helping victims. Operation Blessing met the lead pastor of Paradise Alliance Church, Josh Gallagher. He told the team how his family barely escaped the Camp Fire, which leveled their home.
Gallagher sent his family on to Sacramento, but stayed behind to help other evacuees.
Right now, we don't even know where our congregation is. They are literally scattered all over California, surrounding states, and the nation. But we don't even know right now, and that is the heaviest thing that's on our heart. Because we're supposed to be caring for these people, spiritually and physically, and we're not even sure where they are at this point.
Gallagher believes the church will be essential to rebuilding the community and is hopeful that Paradise, California can be reborn as church leaders join with city leaders and groups like Operation Blessing come alongside to help.
As we were talking with some government officials, they let us know that if this community is going to be rebuilt, the faith community is going to have to lead the charge, because it's within the faith community that people find hope, they find belonging, they find worth.
Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. A blast of Arctic air is expected to bring one of the coldest Thanksgivings on record for the northeastern U.S. Temperatures are expected to fall into the 20s, with Boston being the coldest at just 21 degrees. Below freezing air will also descend on New York City, as more than 3 million people are expected to line the streets for the annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Chilling winds are also expected to reach 30 miles an hour. It will be the coldest Thanksgiving since 1996. Well, the NFL's Game of the Year exceeded expectations Monday night. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Rams put 105 points on the board, making it the highest scoring game in the history of Monday Night Football. It's also the first where both teams scored 50 points or more, and the first where a team scored 50 points and still lost. In the end, the Rams won a game that saw 6 lead changes. And Pat, this is one for the history books.
It is indeed. I wish I'd seen that. I watched the college thing. I was seeing Ohio State and Maryland. It was an extraordinary game, tied. Yeah. And then Ohio State pulled it up by 1 point. But that was an incredible game. Oh, man. Well, our salute to the Chiefs and the Rams. I mean, it was a great game.
I guess with this weekend coming up, we better stay glued to the...
They better. Well, it's going to be cold if you wherever. Yes. But I see these guys playing in the snow. I don't know how they do it, but in any event, I don't think it's going to be... I don't know about the New England Patriots. They have not been showing too well. Yeah. They were the great champions. They're having trouble.
This weekend will separate the men from the boys, temperature-wise.
Will it? Okay. Sure.